So the plot thickens, quite literally. Yesterday we learned about the water, or the sea, splitting open. Vayibaku hamayim. And now, continuing in chapter 14, verse 22, the Torah says, Vayavayu v'nei Yisrael b'sei hayom. The children of Israel came into the sea. V'hamayim lahem chayma, and the water stood as a wall, miyaminam umismoilam, from the right and the left. That's how the pasuk describes the Jewish people's entrance into the sea. So yesterday we learned about the wind, the sea dividing, and now Bnei Yisrael enter the fray. And immediately afterwards, in verse 23 we hear, Vayirdefu Mitzrayim, the Egyptians in hot pursuit follow them. Vayavoyu achareim, they come after them. Kol sus parei, all the horse of the Pharaoh, Richbei ufarashov, the chariots, the cavalry, El Techayam, they all come into the sea. Verse 22 does not have any commentary from Rashi, because by and large, on a literal level, there is nothing that requires elucidation. The sea split open, and the Jewish people entered into the sea. But there's still some questions here. Like, for example, it says, Vayovayo b'nei Yisrael, the children of Israel came, b'soich hayom, into the sea. And then it says, Bayabasha, on dry land. So where did they come to? Did they go into the water? Or did they go into dry land? Which was it? Here the Torah gives two seemingly oxymoronic descriptions, contradictory descriptions. So this is the question. So the truth is that there's a medrash that says that the sea did not divide until the water reached their nostrils. And there was a very brave, heroic individual. His name was Nachshon ben Aminadav. And Nachshon ben Aminadav, Moshe Rabbeinu said, let's go. He said, it's a raging sea. Go. Moshe said, so they went. And Nachshon went all the way right in front of the group, in front of the nation, until the water hit his nostrils. And at that moment, that's when there was the Vayibaka. That's when the splitting, that's when it took place. So there is such a medrash, and actually, according to the Kli Yakar, that's the point of this pasuk, that there was ma'aminim and ein ma'aminim. So the ma'aminim, the believers, they went into the sea, and it was still sea. When Nachshon went into the ocean, it was ocean, a raging ocean. And there was no logical or reasonable or rational way to understand how things would work out right. Of course it did. But he went, b'sei chayam. Conversely, there was the Eidim Aminim. There was the Jews who weren't so sure if they believed this is going to work or not. They said, okay, you go, Nachshon. We'll see what happens with you. If you survive, then maybe we'll jump in too. Which, if this is the case, then you have to understand the verses here in a non-literal fashion, at least chronologically speaking. Because in verse 21 it says, Vayosem esayom lecharava, that God caused the sea to become dry land, Vayubaku hamoyim, and the waters divided. But here, in verse 22, when it says, Vayavayu b'nei Yisrael b'sei chayom, the waters didn't divide yet. In other words, the Torah is not giving you an exact chronological description. The waters did divide, that's true. It did happen when it says in verse 21. It is also true that they went into the waters. And there's not a contradiction exactly. There were some people who did one or the other. So obviously Rashi doesn't say that, because that's contradictory.
So where's the easterly wind, like sequence-wise? Where does
the easterly wind, according to depends who you ask. According to the Ibn Ezra, it was still blowing. Okay. According to the Orach Chaim, it stopped blowing now. It finished blowing. Morning, the day broke, which is still very much night. It's very dark. Talking about the rise of Venus, Alot HaShachar. And at this point, the wind stopped. And Moshe said, now. Like, now. There's a sea. Now. So Nachshon went. And the water reaches his nostrils. And then comes the Vayibaku hamoyim. But like I said, the problem is that in verse 21 it says Vayibaku hamoyim. And it's only in verse 22 that we hear about going into the sea. So it should be noteworthy Rashi doesn't say anything like that. Rabbeinu Bechaya says that the Jewish people went, Vayavayu b'nei Yisrael b'soich hayam, they went into the sea. It does not mean they went into the water. They went into the ocean bed. They went into where the ocean usually was. And this is a very reasonable approach. It just makes plain sense. That's the meaning of B'seich Hayom. It doesn't say B'teich Haymoyim. It doesn't say they went into the water. It says they went into the Yam, the sea. Okay, the sea, the ocean bed, where the sea usually was. The Orach Chaim kind of follows along the path of the Rabbeinu Bechaya, and he says that B'toch Hayam, it doesn't say Vayavoyu Bnei Yisrael Bayam. It says B'toch Hayam. So he says that means B'pnimi Yusay. They went deep into the heart of where the sea was. This was a steep decline, and they went right down into it. And the amazing thing was that it was Yabasha. Not just the beach dried out. The truth is the beach is always dry. It's not so muddy. People walk on the beach, they don't sink. But you start going into the ocean, then the ocean bed gets a little finer. And then it's easier to sink. So they went straight into B'seich Hayam, not just along the sand on the beach, and they went into the sea, and you should know it was by Yabasha, that it was perfectly dry. Which of course debunks the ridiculous notions of low tides and high tides and oceans coming in and oceans coming out. You know, water can move, but there's no walls, minimum usmoilam, and the Torah is very clear about that. And there's no bayabasha, there's no dry land where ocean was a moment ago. So they go into the sea. Vahamayim lahem chayma, and the water stood as walls. So the walls of water, the Ibn Ezra says, nikrashu hamayim, the water congealed. Water is usually wet, water usually flows, and here water became solid. Liquid became solid. That's what happened, that was the miracle. So that's the meaning of it stood as a wall. Rabbeinu Bechaya said that it didn't have to be a wall. You could just say, Vahamayim amdu. It says, Lahem choyma. It was for them a wall. So Rabbeinu Bechaya therefore says, the mayim was served as a protection. People put up walls to protect themselves. So these water now turned into a wall of protection for the Jewish people. And according to some of the commentaries, they could see the power, the force of the archangel Gabriel, Malach Gavriel, that he surrounded them and they were protected. And even though they saw Mitzrayim coming into the sea, they had a sense of security. They knew they were being protected. The Mayim was not threatening. They didn't see the waters of wall as a threat to their lives, but instead they saw it as a protective reality. What did the Egyptians do? They followed right after. In hot pursuit, the Egyptians came after. Now the obvious question is, why weren't they suspicious? They saw enough miracles to know that these people are unusual, that strange phenomenon happens. So if there was no miracles, and they were going to attack them, okay, so the Egyptians said the miracles ran out. They ran out of miracle juice, and from this point and onward, we're going to be able to be victorious. But when you see the sea split open, and the Jewish people going down into the sea, you got to be pretty much of a fool to go right after that. Remember, they've suffered already 10 plagues, and many other miracles in between. Why'd they follow? So the Bechor Shor says, they didn't realize where they were going. It was still dark. It wasn't the sun had risen. This is the moment day breaks. So they just kept following the people. They were pursuing the people. The people kept going, so they kept going without even realizing they had just walked down into the ocean bed. And then they took a look up and said, look where we are. There's the walls of water, and then it was too late. So that's on a very literal level the way the Bechor Shor explains it. The Chizkuni says, yeah, but when day breaks, you could still see something. You could still make something out. You would think that those at the front, including the Pharaoh, would have a moment for caution, just to see where this is going. So he says this is the idea of the cloud, which darkened things for them. So yes, typically you could see something. The Jewish people saw already an outline of what was going on. They could see there was walls of water, but the Egyptians didn't see that. And this goes back to another medrash that asked the famous question, that Choshech, the only Makkah that we hear about 6 days, not 7 days, but all the Makkah will last for 7 days. And the question is, where's the 7th day of Choshech? And the answer is, on the 7th day of Pesach. That the cloud came like Choshech, so they saw absolutely nothing. They were able to move, but they couldn't see anything. So blindly, they knew the Jewish people, maybe because they heard, had kept going forward, and they just kept going, without realizing that they had placed themselves in mortal danger going right down into the ocean bed. The ocean bed has a steep decline. The beaches, the first 20, 30 yards, maybe is not, but at a certain point, it drops. And they should have known that they drop, but by the time they were dropping or going down, they didn't realize what was happening. Now, Rashi points out the one thing, the real anomaly here, it says that the Egyptians pursued them, and it says Vayirdefu, which is plural. Vayavoyu, they came, and Achareim, after them. All three words are plural. Who? So it says Kol Sus Pare, all the horse of Pare. That says it's singular. And then it says Richboy, Ufarashav, which again turns plural. El Teichayam, into the middle of the sea. So why is it that the one word that comes out to be singular is sus, is the horse? So Rashi says, do you know why the Torah says sus? Do you know why the Torah uses a singular expression? Because v'chisus echad haya, was there but one sword, horse? It was a cavalry. And Rashi already spoke earlier as to where they got those horses from. If all the animals died in pestilence, where did they get horses from? And Rashi already answered this. And he says, these were the good ones. These were the Egyptians who brought the animals indoors. They actually believed Moshe Rabbeinu when he said the animals are going to die. And Rashi says from there we have the Retzeitz Tevshe b'Mitzrayim, Retzeitz Ismeichai. The best of them, you better protect yourself. Eliminate the best of them, because the best of them will kill you first. So now it says one horse. So Rashi says Magid. This comes to tell us Shein Kulam Chashuvin Lefnei Hamakim Elakasus Echad. Don't think that Hashem was having a hard time here. It's like one horse. It wasn't a cavalry. It wasn't an army. It wasn't thousands of horses. It was a horse. No problem. The Jewish people go down. It's like a horse, a toy horse that goes in. And here, the miracles are going to begin to unfold. But we're going to focus on these waters that became walls. Let's take a look. Let's open the Burim book. We're going to begin.
I still don't understand the singular horse as opposed to horses.
The singular horse is to convey to us that this was not a big deal for God, quote unquote. Like a horse. That's how Rashi explains it in a literal way. So here on page Reish Tzadik, the Rebbe quotes a Shmois Rabbah, the Medrash Rabbah, that on this pasuk in the Medrash Rabbah it says that there was walls of water, or the waters that became walls. So it was not just waters of walls, which we talked about, the idea of protection, not just water congealing, but the Medrash goes on to say, Hoisabas Yisrael Everes Bayam, Ubna B'yada. So you had young mothers, and the young mothers walking into the ocean bed. As the young mothers were walking into the ocean bed, who was with them? Babies. The children, the babies. Babies don't walk by themselves. So they had the babies in their hands, the small children in their hands, Ubna B'yada. And maybe the children started crying. First of all, they didn't get a good night's sleep. Right? The parents were anxious. Surely that got communicated to the children, and that the children were crying. And so the Medrash Rabbah says, "Peshetas yada." She reached her hand, and it tells us tapuach oyrimein. She could pick an apple or a pomegranate mitei chayam from amidst the sea. V'neisen es loi, and she gives it to him. So the water not only became walls, but in fact the ocean bed blossomed, and then there was this fruity phenomenon. All of a sudden, apples and pomegranates started growing. Now, it's a medrash, that's true, and maybe you could understand this in some kind of metaphoric way, but at the end of the day, the medrash does say that. What is the point? Like, why even say something like this? What is the Torah trying to convey to us? And it does seem that we take this literally. This is not just a theory, that there was a child, and the child was crying. And that's real. The children were definitely crying. There's no question. They were definitely crying babies. So if there's crying babies, and it says there was trees that grew, and the mothers picked these apples, and they gave it to the children to keep them happy. So the Rebbe's question is a famous question, which is articulated by the Ran in the Rosh Ches, where the Ran says that Le'avid kuchabricho nisin l'megana. God doesn't do miracles for no reason. The Ran explains there that nature is cherished by Hashem. Hashem created nature. It doesn't just abrogate or destroy the laws of nature. And therefore, if Hashem destroys nature or shakes up the nuclear physics of the world, there's got to be a good reason for it. It doesn't just happen. Now, this is definitely a shattering of nature on so many levels. First of all, ocean beds don't give that kind of vegetation. Apples don't grow in the sea. Pomegranates don't grow in the sea. Somebody had to plant them, and it doesn't grow in moments. And even if a tree were to grow in moments, fruits don't come in moments. I mean, this is an acceleration of time that's mind-boggling. It's not the right place, it's not the right time. The whole thing just doesn't add up. So why would God do this phenomenal miracle? What then was this extraordinary miracle just to keep the kids happy? I mean, kids are important, but we're talking here about saving the Jewish people. We're talking here about saving a nation. We're talking here about God's newly minted nation that's right now threatened with extinction, quite literally. We're going to be massacred at the sea, nothing left. All right, so the kids will cry a little. I mean, the worst things have happened. They'll get through it. They get kvetchy kids you can deal with. Miracles don't happen today. We have kvetchy kids. You deal with it. What was the point? Why do we have tzmichas ilonis? Why do we have the blossoming or growing of these trees? And not just any trees, but nesepedas, trees that have fruit. And that gave it be'efim miyadi, bikarka isa hayam, in the ocean bed, and it happened instantaneously. If apples and pomegranates would grow on dry land instantaneously, it would be a miracle. If trees would grow in the ocean bed and give no fruit, that would be a miracle. And here we have miracle upon miracle. So the Rebbe suggests that that contrary to what people usually think of when they read about this miracle, this was not a standalone. This was simply a side effect of the splitting of the sea. The splitting of the sea was the big miracle. And the splitting of the sea was a miracle which brought about such phenomenal and remarkable change that this was the natural outgrowth. A natural miracle, if you will. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but that's once the nuclear physics are suspended, and once the reality, as it were, isn't, then this is what you should have expected. Well, what does that mean? Why? Well, the splitting of the sea is one thing, and trees growing out of the ocean bed seem to be something entirely different. And here's the point. The inner message or inner idea of the splitting of the Reed Sea is explained in the teachings of Chassidus, primarily in Torah on Parshas B'Shalach. Al Yesed HaKosov, based on the pasuk which David HaMelech prophetically provides for us in the book of Tehillim, describing what Hashem did for the Jewish people when we left Mitzrayim. And the words of David HaMelech are, in Psalm 66, Hafach Yom Layabasha. God transformed sea into dry land. That's what David HaMelech says. And the Alter Rebbe explains that the meaning of this is Hamatorah ha'olekis shebebriya, that the godly intention and purpose of creation. So, biyamim kitikunam, on a regular day, you don't know why God created the world. You see a world. The world, in and of itself, seems to conceal the reality of God. In fact, that's innately so. Even to the point that the world is called an olam, which olam, meaning world, is also a permutation of the Hebrew word helam. Helam means concealment. You will not figure out the purpose of creation if you're left to your own devices. You may figure out how to unlock the natural sciences. You may figure out how to harness technology. You may figure out nuclear physics. That, if you're left to your own devices, humanity has figured out many things. Here's what humanity will never figure out. They will never figure out the purpose of all this. And indeed, we live in a time where there is more knowledge than ever before in human history. We have the ability to harness the quantum physics of existence. We haven't come any closer to being more spiritual necessarily in the world. People haven't come any closer to finding more fulfillment. In fact, we live in a time where people have less fulfillment than ever. And the one thing that has risen over the last 10 years, with all of the remarkable development of technology, is the suicide rate and people's unhappiness. That's the one thing that's risen, which makes no sense. If we have so much, why do people feel they have so little? Because you don't figure this out by yourself. But this requires not scientific inquiry, this requires revelation. This requires Hashem giving us a Torah and us taking the time to humble ourselves and say, we don't know everything. We are not the masters of our own destiny. There is a creator, and that creator provides us with the handbook. He gives us the roadmap. That creator tells us why there's a creation and what's the purpose of life itself. So, on a good day, it's all concealed. And this is, metaphorically, Kishem Shahayom Mastiris Masher B'Teiche. Just like the sea conceals that which is inside it. In the language of the Zohar, this is called Alma the Iskasya and Alma the Isgali. This is the revealed world and the concealed world. And in planet Earth, which is a reflection of a higher spiritual truth, 3/4 of the earth is covered or concealed. We don't see what's going on beneath it. And 1/4 of the earth is exposed, and you can see all kinds of things. And that's a reflection of a deeper spiritual truth. So, and all this is Bali de Gilui. At Kriyas Yamsuf, it wasn't just that sea split open. It's that the reality of sea, which is a metaphor for the concept of concealment, was suddenly torn asunder. So the natural concealment that's innate in creation was no longer in place. That's the meaning of the sea split open. And when the natural concealment, the camouflage that Hashem put in place, has now been removed, so then, Mahi Oisa Hamatara Hanasteres Shebebriya. What is the purpose of creation? Okay, so there's a purpose. Let's say I agree with that. I'm ready to listen to that. There's a purpose. What, pray tell, is the purpose? And our answer is that the purpose of creation, which was revealed at the time of Kriyas Yamsuf, this is what we learned about at the very beginning of the Torah. The first time we opened the Chumash and we took a look in the words Bereshis bara, in the beginning Hashem created, Rashi right away came and he said, Bereshis bara. Let me tell you what this is about. Hashem created the world for Beis Reshis, for two things that are called Reshis. First, what is this two things called first? For the Torah and for Yisrael. So what's the purpose of creation? Bishvil Yisrael shenekru Reshis. For Israel it's called Reshis. In other words, the purpose of creation is that we should be a world at some point that Am Yisrael should appear in this world. So the whole purpose of creation was for this moment, when the Jewish people now became a nation. And our job in turn is to be a light unto the nations and to guide and illuminate the lives of the rest of humanity so that in the end, everybody serves Hashem. That's the purpose of creation. Kilomer, in other words, as the miracle of the splitting of the sea continued to unfold, any part of creation that the Jewish people came in contact with, began to do everything it could not to conceal the Creator, but rather to reveal the Creator. And the meaning of revealing the Creator is l'sayeya, to assist Bnei Yisrael. So in order for Bnei Yisrael to do what they have to do, the children need to be happy. Because if you have unhappy children, you have unhappy parents. If you have unhappy parents, you'll have an unhappy nation, and then you'll have an unhappy Moshe Rabbeinu, and nobody will be able to function. So what happens? Every iota of existence yearned and craved a single thing. How do I help these people do what they're supposed to do now? V'kivan shekein, and because that's true, even the sea, which also has some kind of awareness, even the floor, the ocean bed, also has some kind of awareness. It understood too. And therefore, everybody, all of creation mustered all of its ability. And all of a sudden, it was able to grow forth trees which were laden with fruit. And it was all Lishimusham Shel Bnei Yisrael. And if this sounds a little geocentric to you, we're okay with that. We actually believe in a geocentric reality on a philosophical and theological level. That's what we believe creation is for. Yes, creation is for that we should open a siddur now and that we should daven. Creation is for that after davening we should take the time to give tzedakah and do what has to be done. Creation is for our serving Hashem. And at that moment, the whole world knew it and felt it and acted like it. And that's why Kriyas Yamsuf was a little bit of a foretaste into a future messianic reality. And indeed, what does it say in the future when Mashiach will come? It says that even the trees will give forth delicacies. It says also that if a Jew would come to pick a fruit on Shabbos, the tree itself would scream, It says, are you out of your mind? You don't pick me today. I don't want to be picked on Shabbos. You have a job, you have to serve Hashem. So all of creation at some point will actually become animated. And all of creation will assist us in our Avodas Hashem. That's the way it was during Kriyas Yamsuf. And this helps us appreciate the remarkable moment, which was not just an act of salvation, but rather a time of extraordinary divine revelation, a time in which every part of existence that we came in contact with had only a single focus, namely to aid and assist, to help us to fulfill our mission making this world a godly and a holy place. May the rest of the story unfold speedily and in our days. Amen.